Much of what I do is work in the realm of jobs and livelihoods. And what I thought I'd talk about today is an aspect of jobs which few of us think about, which is how is the fourth industrial revolution, which is upon us, going to impact all our lives. I'll start with 1750. In the year 1750, India accounted for a staggering 25% of global industrial output. China was about the same. By 1900, India's share had declined to less than 2%. Why did this happen? Well, there are multiple reasons, as with most things. One was the decline of the Mughal Empire. It resulted in lots of strife and chaos, and that affected economic activity. The second was colonization by Britain, which was hugely extractive. But I think most of all, it was because we missed the first industrial revolution, right? The first industrial revolution was about the invention of the steam engine and powered looms, and it created a wave of productivity which overwhelmed our textile industry, our handloom industry. And so India deindustrialized very rapidly and fell into poverty. Same thing happened to China. But in the last 30 years, China has caught up with a vengeance. They've reindustrialized. India is just beginning its struggle to reindustrialize. Now, why is this historical anecdote relevant? It's relevant because, to use business jargon, the first industrial revolution was a disruption. And those countries that seized that disruption, drove that disruption, went from rags to riches. And conversely, those who missed it, like India, went from riches to rags. And if anything, this fourth industrial revolution that we're in the middle of promises to be even more disruptive than the first and the second. And so the question for countries like ours is, this tidal wave is coming. Are we going to be able to seize it and ride it to prosperity? Or once again, are we likely to be swept away by it? Now, what is this fourth industrial revolution? Once again, it has many monikers, Industry 4.0, etc. But fundamentally, it is about huge advances that are happening in many, many fields simultaneously. In genomics, in robotics, in computer science, in materials, new manufacturing technologies, space, energy. What is common across all of them is they're driven by science, science-based innovation. And we can see what's happening with just staggering speed. Machines are closing in on human capability amazingly fast. Physical capability, but even more in terms of mental capability. And I think most of you in this room, I don't know whether it will happen in my lifetime, but certainly in your lifetime, we'll reach this point, which is called singularity, when machines converge with human beings in terms of their intelligence. And the scary thing is they continue to get smarter. And so we don't know where that will lead. What is also happening is huge advances in space, thanks to companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin. Space travel seems imminent for every person. And we can see colonies on Moon and Mars, certainly within the century. And we're seeing stunning advances in genomics. But essentially, we're now at the point where genes can be edited, just like software, and we can design organisms purpose-built for anything we want, including sucking carbon dioxide outside from the atmosphere. And so science fiction is giving way to everyday reality. Now, as with most things, the Industrial Revolution and all these technologies are going to destroy many existing jobs while creating new ones. And the question is, or the debate is, will it create net new jobs or not? I tend to agree with the experts that say that in the short and medium term, it'll probably destroy more jobs than it creates. Perhaps in the longer term, you may see many more new jobs. And you can see this happening with stunning rapidity, right? So, we used to think just 5 years and 10 years ago that automation would largely impact low-skilled workers in factories. Now we know that's not true. It impacts software developers, lawyers, stockbrokers, and yes, even CEOs. Just 6 weeks ago, McKinsey released a report that says 50% of the tasks in a CEO's office can be automated. Perhaps most of us knew that already. The other thing that's quite interesting is a report from Oxford, the Martin School, which has estimated that 47% of all jobs in the US, 69% of all jobs in India, and 77% of all jobs in China will be gone in the next 2 decades. And lest you think this is just, conjecture, last year, Chinese factories installed more robots than they hired people. And this year, when you look at the Indian IT industry, which is so important to our economy, they're witnessing jobless growth. The industry will grow 10%, but total employment has peaked. So to me, the really vital question is, where are all the new jobs going to be created, right? So every country is going to lose jobs to automation and all these things. But where will the new high-end jobs be created? Now, common sense would dictate that the new jobs will be where the innovation is happening. And when you look around the world, this science-based innovation is disproportionately happening in America. This is happening to a certain extent in Europe. China is doing a phenomenal amount to try and make sure they don't miss out. But the vast, disproportionate amount of science-based research is happening in the US. And American companies like Google, like Amazon, like Tesla, like Illumina, First Solar, etc. In discipline after discipline, it's American companies that are disproportionately driving disruptive innovation and change. Now, why is this so important? Think about it. Now, when the first industrial revolution happened, there was a wave of job losses in England as well. In fact, it created this Luddite movement where they went and smashed all the powered looms. But very quickly, England and the colonial powers figured out that they could export their job losses to India and China and Africa. And so all the upside of the revolution was captured in the UK and other such places, and the toxic effects were exported. So could this happen again is the interesting question. Could it be that once again, countries like India will become mere markets for innovation that happens elsewhere? Would we end up, therefore, creating only low-wage services jobs? Could we once again be colonized, this time not by countries, but by companies? And India's just beginning its rise to prosperity. We've become a low-middle-income country now. Will this rise stall? Those are the kind of policy questions. Now, what is it going to take for us to capture this moment and seize this rising tide? I bet many of you have been in conversations where somebody in the room says, I wonder when the next Google, Apple, Microsoft is going to come out of India. I'm sure you've been part of that conversation. And it's like asking, when is an Indian man going to win the 100-meter sprint gold medal? It may happen. It may happen simply because we're a large nation and therefore, there's somebody exceptional out there who will overpower the system and get to the podium. So it's entirely feasible. But it won't happen by intent, the way America has created a factory that churns out one world beater after another. So what does it take? Why do these companies arise so frequently in the US? It's not an accident. It's because America has invested in scientific research. Much of it happens in places like Stanford and MIT. A lot of it happens in corporate labs. If you think about the third industrial revolution, it was spawned at places like Bell Labs, at Xerox PARC. Today it happens in R&D, it's corporate labs like GE, Microsoft, etc. But a ton of this R&D and innovation is underwritten by the US government, right? Particularly their Department of Defense. So a lot of the high-risk, long-term R&D is government-supported. We all celebrate the innovation that's the iPhone. But how many of us realize that every single of the innovation in the iPhone was actually the product of this kind of R&D, ranging from the capacitive touchscreen, the display, GPS, voice recognition, and the internet itself was a product of all this. So this is, I think, at the heart of it. Immigration policies is another one. The US has always thrown its doors open to the best and brightest from every country, from Russia, from India, China, Hungary, and welcomed them into these labs. And of course, the innovation ecosystem there that takes these innovations and commercializes them. It's very, very, very systematic. Now you contrast that with where we are in India. The stunning thing to me is there's not even a recognition of this tidal wave that is upon us. And there is very little public discourse, which is why I chose this as my topic today. Our policymakers, our business leaders, our academics, everybody is still in the old paradigm, the third industrial revolution, and we're trying to play catch up with good success. But it's time to leapfrog. When you think about the science-based innovation, it's interesting to note that our top institution, the Indian Institute of Science, is not in the global 300. It's somewhere below 300. When you think about all these fields, and you try and recollect the name of an Indian company that is a world leader in any of these fields, it's a struggle to come up with names. If you think about the best and brightest engineers and scientists, if they want to do this kind of work, where do they go today? They can go to the corporate lab of a multinational company like GE or Google in India, or else they have to leave. So, it is no wonder when you look at the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem, so much of what is happening is Me Too kind of innovation in our startups, not game-changing ideas. Now, this is important. I think we've really, this is the moment. We're at a tipping point, and our prosperity depends on seizing this moment. What will it take? I don't think this problem is so large, and we're a little late. So individual companies cannot do that much. What it takes is a moonshot. Many of you will remember President Kennedy in 1961 said, we commit this nation to putting a man on the moon by the end of this decade and returning him safely to Earth. That was the public commitment, and mobilized the entire country in pursuit of that mission. I believe India needs something of that sort. I'm going to conclude with, because this is ink, I'm going to let Shakespeare make my final point, because he says it far more beautifully than I could. He says, there is a tide in the affairs of man, which taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. Omitted, the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves us or lose our ventures. Thank you.